Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into an event that was actually classified by some circles as one of the absolute deadliest terrorist incidents on American soil since Pearl Harbor. We're going to explore a mystery that has completely baffled authorities, terrified witnesses, and spawned literally countless investigations. It's this incredibly intense story of Cold War espionage, a wildly botched mission, and a sequence of events so horrifying it honestly seems to defy reality itself. So let's start with a chill that still echoes from that fateful morning.
I am God. Yeah, those were the actual chilling final words whispered right into the ear of a dying doctor at exactly 5 a.m. on June 10, 1972. The stage for all this was Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, California. It was a place of healing that, in just a matter of minutes, would be transformed into an absolute slaughterhouse by a single, terrifying perpetrator.
Section 1. The Soviet Super Soldier. Okay, let's dive into this. To really wrap our heads around what happened in that hospital, we have to look way back into the shadowy depths of the Cold War. According to intelligence recovered by the CIA during the Vietnam War, the perpetrator wasn't just some random serial killer. No, she was a direct product of Operation Iron Wolf, which was a highly classified Soviet super soldier program.
We can actually trace the horrifying path that led straight to the massacre. So, following the discovery of Operation Iron Wolf, the U.S. scrambled to form Task Force Olympia to hunt down these sleeper agents. But the Soviets, they were already making their moves. In 1970, they deployed a highly lethal agent known only as Asset X to American soil. Her mission was to assassinate General Owen Garfield, who was a close friend of President Richard Nixon. But the mission went horribly wrong. While covertly tailing the general, Asset X was involved in a massive car wreck. Injured and totally disoriented, she fled the scene before the cops could even arrive, and well, she ended up right at Cedars-Sinai Hospital.
It turns out the agent's real name was Vladimira Petrova, operating under the alias Sheila Monroe. But honestly, it was her appearance that instantly sent shockwaves of terror through the hospital staff and patients. See, prior to her deployment, she had suffered this severe malfunction during plastic surgery. The result? A flawless, terrifyingly featureless face that looked exactly like a mannequin. Just imagine that for a second. A mannequin moving with the fluid dexterity of a normal human being, staring right at you with totally deadpan eyes. That is exactly what stumbled through those hospital doors in a blood-soaked white gown.
Section 2. Massacre at Cedars-Sinai. Now, the tension in that emergency room must have been absolutely suffocating. Let's move into the actual events of the massacre itself, a sequence of violence that escalated in the blink of an eye.
Picture this. Asset X walks in, and get this, she's got a mangled kitten clamped so tightly in her jaws you can't even see her teeth. She casually pulls it out of her mouth, tosses it aside, and just completely collapses to the floor. The staff, obviously unnerved but doing their jobs, took her to a room to clean her up. She was completely calm, totally expressionless, and perfectly still. She didn't even protest as they strapped her down, figuring it was best to restrain her until the authorities showed up. But the second the staff attempted to administer a sedative, everything changed. As the needle went into her arm, her entire body violently arched up from the bed.
She slowly turned those emotionless eyes toward the male doctor, and she smiled. But as she smiled, the hospital staff literally shrieked, because inside her mouth weren't human teeth. They were rows of long, incredibly sharp spikes, so long that she couldn't even close her mouth without causing damage. Staring at this absolute impossible nightmare, the doctor asked his final, doomed question. What in the hell are you?
7. That is the number of lives she brutally ended in the span of just a few horrifying minutes. As security and heavily armed LAPD officers rushed down the hallway, she darted forward and tore open the doctor's jugular with a single bite. Then she turned her attention to the responding officers. She brutally martyred 5 heavily armed policemen, even cannibalizing their corpses in a scene so incredibly gruesome that a nurse reportedly died of shock just watching it. And then she simply vanished without a trace, earning the terrifying moniker, the Expressionless.
You know, even within the Soviet ranks, the whole incident was a massive anomaly. When defectors finally revealed the existence of Operation Iron Wolf in 1974, they were just as baffled as we were. As Tatiana Makarova noted here, for an elite, highly trained agent to suddenly abandon her mission and massacre a civilian hospital like some rabid serial killer, it made absolutely zero sense. It was this giant puzzle that haunted investigators for decades.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is absolutely none of that actually happened. I mean it. Zero, zip. There was no Operation Iron Wolf, there was no Soviet super soldier, there was literally no massacre at Cedar Sinai in 1972. The story I just told you with absolute documentary seriousness is actually one of the most elaborate, fascinating pieces of internet fiction ever created. Section 3, The Truth Behind the Myth. So let's step out of that wild fictional universe and back into the real world. How on earth did a complete fabrication become so widely accepted that people were genuinely terrified of a mannequin-faced assassin?
Well, the terrifying Asset X is actually a super famous piece of digital folklore. It was penned by a British horror writer named T.J. Leah and originally dropped onto the internet back in June 2012. He titled it The Expressionless. It was just a short, standalone scary story specifically designed to shock and unnerve readers, and man, it worked perfectly. It went massively viral on Tumblr and the Creepypasta Wiki, terrifying millions of people who happened to stumble upon it late at night.
And the thing that really, truly sold the whole shebang was the evidence attached to it. A grainy black and white photo of two nurses looking nervously at a mannequin-like woman in a hospital bed. People used to call it the most cursed image of all time. But actually, the mundane truth is kind of hilarious. It was just a photograph taken back in 1968 by Lord Snowdon. Its actual title? Student Nurses with a Waxwork Patient. It was literally just a medical training dummy. A totally harmless, everyday photo that was completely repurposed to give this fictional story a terrifying veneer of reality.
The story was so incredibly convincing, and it spread like such wildfire, that by 2013, the fact-checking website Snopes actually had to formally step in. They officially debunked the hospital massacre legend because people were genuinely out there searching historical records, trying to find the names of the victims. Of course, they found absolutely nothing. It was 100% purely supernatural fiction being passed off as historical fact.
Section 4. Anatomy of a Creepypasta. Okay, so how does a simple short story about a spooky waxwork photo explode into a massive Cold War conspiracy involving super soldiers and task forces? To get that, we have to look at the unique way internet folklore actually gets built.
So the crucial point is right here in this definition. A creepypasta is basically our modern internet urban legend. Much like folks used to share spooky stories around a campfire, today we copy and paste fiction with horror elements across forums. But what makes it so entirely unique is that collaboratively modified part. Once a story hits the web, it doesn't just sit there. The community grabs it, plays with it, and completely expands it. Section 5. Evolving Internet Folklore. And this introduces the truly fascinating way internet communities take a core horror concept and build massive, sprawling alternate realities around it. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that evolution happens. If you look at the columns here, originally T.J. Leah's 2012 story presented the Expressionless as just an unexplained supernatural woman, maybe a demonic entity with absolutely zero background. But when a community known as the Deltaverse Wiki got their hands on it, they expanded that standalone spooky story into an insanely intricate timeline. They gave her a name, Vladimira Petrova. They gave her motivation, a botched assassination, and they tied her to a massive, totally fictional Cold War program.
What you really should take away from all this is just how powerful the internet is as a collaborative storytelling tool. It blurs the lines between history and fiction so effectively because fans write the lore with absolute documentary seriousness. They use dates, military jargon, fake quotes, the whole 9 yards to create this incredibly immersive rabbit hole effect. It's honestly a testament to human creativity. It shows how millions of people can work together to turn a single creepy photo of a medical dummy into an intricate, terrifying alternate history that feels undeniably real.
Which leaves us with a final, really fascinating question for this explainer. Think about it. If a single photograph of a training dummy can spawn a fictional massacre that feels so incredibly real that professional fact-checkers literally have to debunk it, how easily does fiction blur with reality in our modern digital world? It's a fantastic reminder to always check your sources, but it's also a wonderful showcase of just how much fun we can have with modern mythology. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.